Dominic Cummings, love him or hate him, the man, the myth, very much, again, a myth in, shall we say, now becoming the British political landscape. Um, Again, I would genuinely love to talk to Dominic Cummings. And I know, yeah, he would probably be like a really fascinating interview because I'd love to get to the heart of what his politics are, what he actually believes, and stuff like that. Because he never does those types of interviews. He mainly talks about obviously his time in Downing Street, which is obviously probably the most relevant thing. But needless to say, I would love to talk to him. Like I said, I have reached out to him before, but again, why is he going to talk to me though? Again, I'm not that big-headed enough to believe that Dominic Cummings must come and do an interview with me, because at the end of the day, I'm nobody really on the sort of the political landscape, should we say? So who knows? Maybe one day, who knows? But needless to say, obviously these revelations that he keeps on coming out with, especially around Partygate, believed to be the original leaker of many of these stories around Johnson and the parties that have gone on, definitely seems to have an axe to grind, and definitely seems indeed to want to take down Boris Johnson. Indeed, in this article, describes it as it's like cleaning the drains, almost, in a way. So you've probably heard a lot recently again about Dominic Cummings very recently. Well, this is where this article right here that we're going to go through is where all these quotes have come from. So before we go diving into that, please do remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page and a notification link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can always, buy me coffee. And as always, thank you very much to all those people who do support the channel that way. And of course, on with the show. So this comes from the New Yorker, or the Intelligentsia. I think it's part of the same sort of branding thing. So the title is "The Man Trying to Take Down Boris Johnson. It's an unpleasant business, but a necessary job," says Dominic Cummings. "It's like fixing the drains." There is a joke in the British political circles that Dominic Cummings exists to destroy prime ministers. After his organisation Vote Leave won the Brexit referendum in 2016, David Cameron resigned, and Cameron's successor, Theresa May, stepped down when a Brexit deal was derailed. Now it appears to be the turn of Boris Johnson, Cummings' former boss. Cummings was his most senior advisor, his de facto chief of staff, and the architect of the Tories' 2019 landslide victory in the general election. A year later, he lost a power struggle with Johnson's third wife, Carrie, and left 10 Downing Street, the seat of British power, with a cardboard box in his arms. Now, Johnson is falling. There have been a series of leaks about his staff breaking the lockdown rules created during the early months of the pandemic. While the country they governed, people died alone, without loved ones for company, and Cummings himself was accused of breaking the rules, leaving London to the north of England back in April 2020, he says, for security reasons. It often seems as if Johnson and his team did nothing but party. There was a party for Johnson's birthday, a party where invitees were encouraged to bring your own booze, a party night before the Queen buried Prince Philip, her husband of over 73 years, at a socially distanced funeral. And as a result of Partygate, as it is known, Johnson's polling is in freefall. His Conservative Party is in open revolt, and his premiership is hanging on by a thread. He's the subject of 2 inquiries, one by a civil servant and one by the police, and he's been accused of lying to Parliament about the party's a resigning offence. And it is believed that even if he hangs on, his party will drop him before the general election of 2024. So it is also believed that Cummings, who earlier this year used his Substack to break the story of one of the illicit gatherings in Downing Street in May of 2020, and is the source of some of the most damning leaks that have appeared in the British press. Removing Johnson from power, Cummings tells me over Zoom, is an unpleasant but necessary job. It's sort of like fixing the drains. He speaks slowly and in a northern English accent. Cummings is half myth in the British politics. He gives very few interviews, but the man who faces me is slender and wan. His testimony is incredible because it is unfiltered. There have been whistleblowers before, but certainly none like this. The characteristic Johnson, he says, who was needed to deliver Brexit and defeat the leftist Labour Party leader Jeremy Corbyn in the election of 2019. But after that, he asks, what's the point of him if Carrie and him are just rattling around there and just effing everything up for everyone else and not doing their job properly? Cummings is not from the usual class of Conservative power brokers. He grew up in the middle class of Durham. His father worked on oil rigs, then became a farmer. Cummings studied ancient history and modern history, Pericles and Bismarck at Oxford. Upon graduating in 1994, he could have gone into banking or even politics, but instead he moved to Russia because his history tutor, a maverick Norman Stone, told him, "Now's the time to be in Moscow. It's completely insane." He co-founded an airline and then was chased out by the Russian mafia and did not work for the security services, people do ask, he says, and returned to England, where he worked on the ultimately successful campaign to keep the pound. It was his introduction to the political class and his awakening. Everyone had all these ideas, he says. The public thinks this, the public thinks that. I went off and did all this research, polling and focus groups and stuff, and it turned out what people want and what they thought in Westminster was a kind of normal opinions weren't actually true at all. He was delighted by this discovery. I rushed off excited to tell them, to say, look, I found all this out, and it turns out we're all completely wrong. This is what people think. And instead of people being happy and updating their opinions, they were very cross and just rejected it. And it was a very big shock to me. He was 28, and then I started to realize this terrible thing. A lot of senior people do not really understand what they're doing at quite a fundamental level. And I realized the whole business was full of people who don't have a clue what they are doing and aren't actually interested in learning, which is very weird to me. Cummings has never been a member of any political party. That his politics are opaque does add to his mystery and explains why he's so widely reviled, shall we say, in Westminster. Remainers hate him for taking him out of Europe. Brexiteers hate him for not being a true believer in the cause, and he attacks the Tory right and the Labour left. His tactics, invoking possibly that Turkey would join the EU to bring racists to the vote leave side, suspending Parliament to help force Brexit through, are considered immoral by his enemies. The suspension of Parliament was also later judged to be illegal. He was also attached to no creed. He's the best political operative in Britain, and since he left Downing Street, he's been a chaos maker. Privately, many people say that they do like Cummings. Benedict Cumberbatch, who played him in Brexit: The Uncivil Wars, a dramatization of the referendum campaign, clearly did. He made him awkward and obsessive, both vulnerable and tough. Why does no one like me, Cumberbatch, as Cummings asked his wife. His bluntness, though, does make enemies. Cummings called David Davis, the former Brexit secretary, thick as mince and lazy as a toad. The media is fascinated by his attacks on Johnson in particular. Camera crews surrounded his North London house, and he shares with his wife and journalist and their son and their young son. They follow him through the streets. He believes that gifted people are repelled by politics. When you talk to them, it's increasingly their attitude. Politics is a shit show. Government is a shit show. We don't want to get involved with that. You're dealing with clowns. You don't build anything. Instead, a lot of people just prefer to build their own walled garden where they can feel like they're building something worthwhile and creating wealth and doing their own thing, increasingly. So how do I insulate myself from politics and government, all of which is a very bad thing? And I'd agree with Cummings on that. That is a very bad thing. We do not want people to be isolated from politics or even the government. Politicians, meanwhile, are obsessed with the media and very little else. People just don't understand the extent to which they are dominated by what's going to appear on TV tonight, what's going to appear in the papers tomorrow, he says. Johnson is an example of a man who governs or performs for the media. In Cummings telling, he is an imbecile. In January of 2020, Cummings says, I was sitting in number 10 with Boris, and the complete F-wit just went on babbling on about, will Big Ben bong for Brexit on the 31st of January? He goes on and on about this day after day, and eventually I just say to him, who cares? What are you talking about? Why are you babbling on about Big Ben? It's completely ludicrous. We won the election a few weeks ago. We have an 80-seat majority. You are literally only in this study because for 6 months, we actually had a plan that focused on the country, not on the stupid media. That's why we won, despite all the pundits saying we were idiots. We didn't know what we were doing. Now we have to prove them wrong. We have an 80-seat majority. We don't have to worry about their babbling. He looks aghast. Why the F are we sitting around having these meetings? What will the Sun do tomorrow about Big Ben? Cummings says that he wanted to tackle the problems of the state: productivity, skills, schools, the NHS management, national security, defence procurement. He once told a journalist, I guess I'm plagued by worries of disaster more than his normal life. But He says that when he pressed this on Johnson, he looked at me if I was completely insane, and that the instant tension. He sees his job just to babble to the media every day. I saw the job as doing actually something that's about what's important. And the truth is, almost all MPs agree with him and think I'm, and his voice trailed off as he sounds wondering, stupid. What is Johnson actually interested in? Moments, says Cummings. Johnson's childhood nickname for him was World King. Johnson thinks, what would a Roman emperor do? So the only thing he's really interested in and generally excited about was like looking at maps, whether he could order the building of things. Cummings says that Johnson fantasizes about monuments going up to him in a very Augustine fashion. I will provide the money. I will build a river to my people. I will provide the money that builds the train station in Birmingham or whatever. And it will all have statues to me, and people will remember me after I'm dead like they did the Roman emperors. Johnson is incredibly trivially lazy and self-absorbed. Ideally, Cummings says that Johnson would have understood the need to delegate actual governance to others. After the election, he didn't even want to play that role. Our relationship got increasingly bad because he was saying to me, why are you spending all your time doing all these things instead with me? And I was saying, well, because you're spending more time in stupid meetings talking about Big Ben bongs, and I've got no interest in that. I'm trying to have proper meetings about important stuff, trying to drive the government agenda on. Much has, of course, been made in the British press about Cummings' battles with Carrie Johnson, a 33-year-old former director of communications for the Conservative Party, who began her affair with Johnson when he was still married to his previous wife. Of course, Cummings tells me, Carrie's in his ear saying to him, all the media is portraying you as a puppet. You're the one who won this election. You should be the one who seems in charge. It's all very dangerous that you're seen as this sort of buffoon who Cummings boots around. She wanted rid of me, and so I didn't want to stay in that kind of dysfunctional environment. So the whole thing just kind of snowballed. It's perfectly reasonable, he adds, for a prime minister's girlfriend, wife, husband, boyfriend, whatever they wish to have views about things. The problem was that she went around her own parallel briefing operation in the flat to the media, which is completely disastrous for government communications, particularly in the pandemic. She's very forceful, he laughs. And he wasn't going to say, hasn't got the balls to say, listen, I'm the prime minister and this is what I'm doing. She thinks that she's understand the whole bunch of things about politics and communication and whatnot. He pauses. She doesn't. Is that fair, though? What's he doing? What's doing to obviously Johnson now? He looks at me as if I'm a child. What fairness has got to do with anything? It's politics. All of this is not fair. The fact that someone wins an election doesn't mean that they should just stay there for years, right? You've got a duffer. If you think someone can do the job or is unfit for the job, my basic approach to it was, if there was a world in which he's accepted his limitations and accepted that number 10 could work in a certain way, there is a way for him to be there as a prime minister. But he's not doing that. And he's just going to treat the place like his own. He stopped for a moment and says, you know what, as he said to me, I'm the effing king around here and I'm going to do what I want. Cummings speaks slowly and deliberately. That's not okay. He's not the king. He can't do what he wants. Once you realize someone is operating like that, then your duty is to get rid of them, not just to prop them up. So what's next? Instead of shoving him out the door, he asks. He won't say. Perhaps he'll build himself a garden wall. But then he says he will reread Annie Karenina and all sorts of different crazy stuff, he says. And then I may write about it on my blog. That suits me for the moment. So overall, again, these revelations, of course, again, nothing new. But the fact that not only are we seeing this, but Cummings is being backed up time and time again by more of these revelations, by what's been going on, by the fact that Johnson's left, security documents out and around the Downing Street flats while visitors were in. Again, this is all backed up now by Cummings. So there's no reason now, I'd say, to be honest, not to believe him. Now, of course, it's still the same, obviously, true thing, trust but verify. But now, when Cummings says something about Boris or anything like that, my instant opinion is, well, it's more than probably going to be true. So that's where Dominic Cummings is at the moment. And quite frankly, as long as, he's in the mood, shall we say, to, get rid of Johnson, why not use him as a potential ally, I say. So, as always, please remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page and a one-off donation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can, buy me coffee. And as always, thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you all next time.